How's it going, Salt Shakers? And let me tell you, I absolutely love going to nations that captivate my interest. So thankfully, Bandai had me covered for the past 3 months. But did it cover other people for the past 3 months? OPO3 was a very trying time. Even though that point was when the new restrictions kicked in for Red, it was still very dominant. If anything, it might have been a little worse. You have Izo, the 5-drop Marco, other cards, and it was just very frustrating to be in. So a lot of eyes were on this set in particular to really remedy a lot of the problems the game had. Looking at Japanese results, the old decks seem to have been going on a decline, and with the restrictions in place for North America specifically, things were looking up. So, looking back, did this set do what it wanted to achieve? Let's find out. So this time we got a whole honkin' 6 leaders right here. Instead of the past sets where we had 8. And this seems to be the new standard moving forward. And I can understand. OPO1, the game was brand new. In OPO2, they introduced black. And then OPO3, yellow. They wanted to show off what each of the colors could do, which is why there were more leaders than what they seem to have right now. They probably want to spread their ideas out for gameplay mechanics across the year, so I feel like this number is pretty respectable. But what's really interesting is that every single one of these is dual color. For the past 3 sets, the only dual color leader that was good was Law, and everything else just fell by the wayside. Like tier 2 at best. You couldn't really use them competitively. The lack of life and not stunning ability definitely didn't help things. But they were really trying to remedy that this time. And I think for at least half of these, they really succeeded. So the first 2 leaders I would really like to touch upon are the 2 leaders that can't attack right here. In OPO3, when they introduced Iceberg, it was just really bad. I can understand why they expected it to perform fairly well. Being able to play a 5 cost by negating 1 Dawn was pretty neat, but it just didn't work out. The deck ran out of steam too easily, so nobody really wanted to give a leader that can attack a serious shot. But I think they really remedied that with these 2 right here. Vivi and Rebecca, being able to fuel your hand through these effects rather than using cards went a long way to making these much more viable, specifically Rebecca. With Vivi, they were centering around the whole thing about giving your characters rush. And that's not bad or anything, but while the Alabasta cards themselves were okay, except for this one, I think the cost of 2 mana to give a character rush was a little too much. Depending on the matchup, you just got absolutely steamrolled. And this deck's power ceiling wasn't as high as other decks, but Yeah, it was bad. But thankfully, not only is Rebecca's ability much more resourceful, the cards surrounding it were also a lot better, particularly Corrida Coliseum. Being able to answer your opponent's board very quickly by just playing a character, while also being able to restand and attack active ones with the Luffy, was really strong. Made board control very easy. And with King Kong Gun, it gave you lethal out of nowhere. And then you have two very sticky bodies right here. One being basically impossible to KO, and the other one protecting you from KO effects. It was particularly good against Red because they didn't bottom deck until very recently. So while Rebecca underperformed in the West compared to Japan, it did win a regional, and it makes a lot of sense. The deck has a very high skill ceiling, and it could be very taxing on you for a really long tournament. 9 rounds, you might not be able to think as critically as you did in round 1. So it makes sense why this leader didn't take off too much, but I really respect this. It gave a new style of play, and it gave Black at least a little presence in the meta, because that color just completely fell off this set, as I'll touch upon a little bit later. But yeah, we have a really solid deck right here. The only problem I have with this is the blue splash. I feel like they just gave that to give a reason as to why this can't attack. The only blue cards I really saw with this were Kaya, which is just a 2k counter. That could be anything. And 3000 Worlds, which is pretty nice to have, especially if you can't KO a character outright, specifically in the mirror. But the effect makes it so that way you have to stick very, very closely to the Dressrosa package, so I'm not really sure why they pushed for having each of the leaders be dual color. I just think it's kind of wasteful. And we could see this absolute waste with Isho. This is fucking terrible. And I can definitely understand why a lot of people would think this would be really good. Being able to restand one of your characters is pretty solid, as well as giving cost reduction to everything just by having a non underneath is not bad, but the color combination doesn't really synergize very well. And the only navy card they introduced this set, other than Isho, is one of our secret rares, Rosinante. But this only plays out 5 costs specifically, so there wasn't a lot, and it could only play green 5 costs, I think. Yeah. So the amount of synergy these two things have with each other, as well as the black cards of the past, wasn't very high at all. So I'm not really sure what they were trying to achieve with this. He feels very out of place with the rest of the set too, so yeah. I'd like a refund. One color combination that did work out very well was Queen. By accident. The idea is that they wanted you to use a combination of these 3 cards right here. But the problem is that with Ice Oni, all it does is affect your opponents with a cost 5 or less. And for as high a cost as this is, it doesn't really do enough for you. While you could cheat it out with this, there's just too many pieces to this combo to where you can't really take it seriously. The fact that none of these cards are foil sort of proves that. And none of the other Animal Kingdom Pirates cards really synergize with this leader at all. But what does synergize with this leader very well are all of these. Specifically your top end right here. The idea with this deck is that you could just remove your opponent's bodies very quickly, be able to heal, yeah, just a very slow burn deck. You could be at 4 life while this is at 0, and then the script suddenly gets flipped on you. Like Rebecca, this is another really tough leader to play. But it is made a little easier with some of these triggers right here. Having a blue blocker that plays from life without any cost is really useful. Having a yellow one is really nice. And Red Rock, if you already have one of these guys out and you want to take care of something big really quickly, you could just play this, swing, gain a life, and then keep the good times rolling from there. I'm not a super big fan of Queen's playstyle, but a lot of people do really like him, and I think he's pretty interesting. He's a lot more unique compared to OP05's Enel, which does a lot of similar things to Katakuri. So it's nice to see Yellow evolve a little bit from where it started, even if it was, again, by accident. Now, one thing that does not evolve Yellow is Doflamingo. I mean, look at this fucking guy. Where's the yellow? Another pretty good leader that takes advantage of its color splash, but again, it's by accident. The film package for this is really strong. Being able to take advantage of those cards from Starter Deck 5 really helped this deck out. But a lot of the Don Quixote Pirates cards aren't super great. The only 2 of any real worth were Doflamingo, as you might expect, and Sugar being the best floodgate in the game currently, at least I think. But for everything else, you have the 7-drop Luffy, the Brook, and then the Nami. With the Nami being able to search things out, the Uda blocker also being a pretty good floodgate. I don't have these cards on me right now because I'm not good enough. But similar to Rebecca, another very high skill ceiling deck. It did win a few regionals here and there, like Rebecca, but it just wasn't good enough for some people. And that's a real shame because while with Queen, I also don't like this deck that much. It's pretty cool. And it's really nice to see a lot of people really clicking with this deck. It's the only really good green deck other than Law, which we'll touch upon a little bit later. And it's nice to see the style of play resurface with this set. However, with Doflamingo, it's more so a green deck at its heart. rather than, being a true green and purple. So for your purple fix, we have Crocodile. Now this is pretty interesting right here. So they made a lot of these types of cards right here that play on life, but you have to neg Dawn to do so. But you're able to gain it back from Crocodile's effect, and then from this Missile Sunday, you gain one regularly. So if you trigger this off of life, you didn't lose anything, and you could potentially draw a card, which is pretty nice. While Missile Sunday did very, very well, and is still used in decks in the future, the 8-drop Crocodile, which I also don't have on me, is too specific and tailor-made for this deck. And the main problem with this leader is that, it tries to play it too safe. I could understand they wanted a really defensive leader, but in this meta, where a lot of stuff is really fast, you don't have a lot of time to develop stuff. So this leader's okay. Definitely sneak up on people, and being able to take advantage of the 8-drop Katakuri. It's pretty nice, but feels like kind of a waste. But what was not a waste is what they did with the alternate arts for this set, specifically for the leaders. OPO3 was a little controversial. While I personally really loved it, some people thought the color schemes used for specific characters was a little off. And I could definitely understand that to a point, but I didn't see a single person complain about these. And it's very easy to see why. I mean, these look beautiful, and represent the characters very well, if you know anything about the source material. I still remember when OPO5 was coming out, or is coming out, one of the things they advertise on their website is, oh man, the manga faces are back. And I'm like, why? These are so good. Like, did you really have to change that? Were that many people clamoring for big heads? They're okay. If you say that the OPO1 All Crocodile looks better than this one, get the fuck out of my house. So with all these cool leaders, even if not all of them were winners, a good amount of them were. So, what would you rather do? Do you want to play one of these? Or do you want to relapse? These really stunk and were really deflating whenever you saw tournament results for OPO4. I still remember Zoro specifically, for the very first OPO4 regional. There was only one that topped, but it also won the event. And you also have Newgate taking up a bunch of slots, Law at a place. And I remember people were saying, oh, well, set is brand new. We don't know how things are going to play out. But people had the simulator, and they were definitely practicing for this event. And not only that, but these leaders are still just naturally strong. Japan really likes to move on to what seems to be the next big thing, even if it means their potential power ceiling isn't as high as opposed to Americans, where we like sweating a lot. And with every passing regional, it became more and more frustrating whenever these three would take up half of the top 16, probably more. Not to say that the leaders I discussed earlier, such as Rebecca or Queen, couldn't win. They could, but there were also a good number of times where they just didn't show up at all, because partially because of yellow. I feel like with Katakuri's ease of use, a lot of people wanted to bring that, which also got a lot of tops, and was a very hard counter to those two decks I listed specifically. Yeah, things just sort of reached a boiling point, to where Bandai announced a pretty crazy restriction list, at least for a little while, where they just straight up banned the Sleater, restrict 5-drop, restrict Adon, which was a big hit to these two, and restrict Nami, or just ban Nami, which was even bigger hit for these two. So moving into the final month of OP04, we have my college thesis. ST10 released at the same time this ban list hit, and I think this might be the best product Bandai has ever put out. This deck is definitely worth a discussion on its own at some point, but everything included here is absolutely fantastic. 7-drop Kid, being able to buff up your leader every turn while still being just an AK body is really strong. Law, skill-checked players, but even then, sometimes they can't really play around this, so another really strong card. The Luffy was pretty okay, and a lot of the other red editions were also pretty okay. The 6-drop Sanji, the 2K counter Jinbei, as well as having the reprint of Nami and Zoro, even if Nami can't be used, was pretty huge. And being able to have these really strong cards accessible through just one product like this is really healthy for the game, I think. So, we have our 3 captains, these are 2-ofs in their deck, so it makes sense that they would be good. But a lot of the other cards were also very good, such as Heat and Jean Bart. These aren't even the only good cards. These are just, in my mind, particularly exceptional. You also have the Beppo, which helps ramp you, Sachi and Penguin, which is beautiful for the starter deck Law. I feel like Killer is a pretty decent blocker. Getting to cycle a little bit is pretty cool. You could see how all these little things interacted with each other. And this led into probably the best meta the game has had since it started out. A lot of people were fearing that Katakuri was sort of going to take over, 10-drop Mom. Was going to really harass people. And I do think it was generally the best performing deck. It even got, a regionals win, the very first time the restrictions were in place. But it wasn't that bad. I think only like an 1/8 of the decks used during that tournament were Katakuri. Another fraction of it, another good chunk of it was Doflamingo. A lot of people were on that. And those were your 2 tier 1 decks. But you also have Magellan, the starter deck Luffy and Law were really strong. Regular Law was actually brought down to a reasonable power level. Still okay. And definitely usable. So if you genuinely like this playstyle, then there you go. And leaders that were thought to be pushed out because of Yellow's assumed dominance, like Rebecca, did still have some time to shine. The restricted format that only lasted a month was something I couldn't participate in all that much due to personal reasons, but I'm really happy with the time that I spent in OPO4. I think it definitely was a step in the right direction, even if they did fumble here and there with not restricting the red stuff sooner. A lot of people say in retrospect that this set was pretty underwhelming, but I don't really think so. There was a lot here, but the problem was that, it was just too good. But now that it was phased out, you have all these other decks that can flourish. Some decks still weren't usable, Isha was still just bad. And the Crocodile, still fairly gimmicky. But it was pretty nice. I'm gonna miss this format. I wish I could have stayed here a little longer, but I'm very happy to be moving on to set 5. Yeah.